Hey guys, we're just recording, so we're going to get going to try to take advantage of your time. I'll just kind of tell you what we're going to do because I'm not going to lead through all this. I encourage you guys, if you are in the chat and we didn't get a chance to meet you and you're new to the call, we're gonna try to aggressively use the chat today. So feel free to mute your mic if you're not on the call. But part of what we want to do, what our objective is just to lead you through conversation. So as you have things that you can add to the conversation, seriously, just unmute and jump in, or obviously aggressively use the chat, and we'll monitor that a little bit on our end and try to do the best we can. As we tell everybody, those of you that were on last month when I failed aggressively on Zoom and everything imploded, that's not going to happen today. So we'll have a recording. You may be listening to the recording right now. That'll be there, and then we'll also send out any of the deck notes that we're going to share with you guys. So anything that you're getting, if you're especially if you're new on the call, you don't have to necessarily feel like you've got to grab all of that, because we'll also grab any chat notes that we drop anything to. So we're going to have like three quick what's up, bud? 3 quick conversations today. I'm going to lead you through a little bit, and then Kay has some guys he's already teed up to kind of share some of the boots on the ground stuff, because part of our objective of the call, you guys, is there's enough opportunities for you guys to listen in on so-and-so talking about all the things they've discovered and learned. What we want to do is give you some content that you can beat around, not only on this call, but maybe take and beat it around with your teams wherever you're leading at. Give you some tools to do that, and hopefully be really relevant. Hopefully be really relevant to where you guys are and where you're leading. So hey, as people are jumping in, we did this last month, so I'm just going to ask you, you can unmute. This is July, or I'm sorry, this is June, but almost July 4th is coming. One of the things that's a big deal, maybe some of you have done life plans and you know what that is, but we talk about replenishment. Our hope is that you guys would be at least having some degree of replenishment, not just because it's summer, but because of the last couple of years we've dealt with. Can maybe just a couple guys tell us something interesting you're doing for replenishment? Like if you're just going to sit in your house and Netflix binge, don't waste our time. But even though that's totally awesome, like somebody tell me something cool that few of you tell us something cool that you're doing, or drop it in the chat real quick. Come on, let's go. Something this in the next few weeks, you're like freaking excited and you're going to make us all feel like we're not awesome because we're not doing it. Come on, give it to us.
Hey, 25 years of marriage, headed to Vegas with my wife.
Who is that?
It's Lindsay.
Lindsay's coming to see me. I appreciate that. Well, that's awesome. Vegas in July. I have no words. So anyway, you understand. You already know what I'm saying. Somebody else.
I'm going in a few weeks on a guided fly fishing trip throughout all the rivers of Montana with my dad.
That could be the winner right now, right off the bat. Anybody one up that guy? Anybody one up?
I got a close second to that. I'm taking my son up near Mammoth for a 4-day fishing trip, just he and I, but it's not fly fishing because we like to kill them.
That's amazing. Love it.
I just got back from a 10-day family trip that we hit all 5 national parks in Utah in an overland Jeep.
Oh, wow. So I'm going to sound really like Derek, you could probably respond to this better than I could, but like, I would assume that's like Zion is one of them, right?
Zion, Capitol Reef, Canyonland, Arches, and Bryce Canyon.
Okay, good. Awesome. I didn't completely fail on that. In the chat, somebody said Cape Paratus, and I said, where is that? Dustin, where is that? Come on, for us West Coasters, where's Cape Paratus? I can't hear you.
Sorry, maybe I spelled it wrong. It's Cape Hatteras. It's on the East Coast. It's
either way. I don't know where that is.
Sure, it's in the Outer Banks, North Carolina. So there's like a strip of islands out.
Like Nicholas Sparks kind of thing.
Yeah, very similar. Less.
How I know that. Don't ask how I know that.
I don't know it either. I'm just going with you.
Love it as well. All right, Tori, I'm going to ask you just to throw the deck up on the screen. as Kay dropped in the chat, he's talking about, physically, intellectually, emotionally, spiritual. Our hope and prayer for you guys is that you will be able to do that. We've gotten to know so many of you guys from just doing these calls, and we trust that in the midst of us pressing on you, like go, 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 that you're actually going to know that we want to see that happen as well in your life. So, hey, one read, and I'll let some of you guys actually talk to this because a lot of you have already read it. And I only put it up here because it speaks to one of our topics this morning. As you replenish, I would assume that some of you are going, hey, what am I going to read? How many of you guys are reading the storybook that we pitched out last week? Anybody grab that and start reading it from The Moth? Is anybody reading that from last month?
I ordered it immediately and I started reading it. It's good. This is the way you're speaking.
Yeah, Wade, how is it? Talk to these guys about it. Tori, you can go forward.
If you love The Moth, then you will really understand. I didn't just say love, understand The Moth. And I think, although I've just started into it, already you can see the power of being able to tell a good story well.
Yep.
Is a very influential ability to communicate. It's a skill.
Great. So last month we talked about a book suggestion was it's a brand new book called How to Tell a Story by the Moth team at NPR. So if you're a communicator, it might be something you might want to pick up and read, because obviously storytelling is a part of it, and we just encourage it. The book that we threw out there this month based on our topic is the Atomic Habits. You guys, a lot of you have probably read it. It's not new. You can go forward, Tori. A lot of it is not new, but it's really the idea of, how do you develop some habits that are personally beneficial? How do you look at habits in a way that actually work? And the reason I wanted to have that conversation, because today we're going to talk about that summer read. I'm going to lead you guys through a conversation for about 10 minutes around organizational habits and how they contribute or hinder to our core values. And then I'm going to hand it off to Kay and some of the people on the call to talk a little more about some work that's happening in the 10-3-1 kind of vision strategy realm, mainly because sometimes in the middle of the summer we realize that fall is coming and there's a need for us to kind of be thinking about where are we pressing our team and where are we taking our team in the next season. So Atomic Habits is a great read. So anybody read it? Want to comment on it real quick? I won't spend a lot of time here because it's not as valuable as the other stuff we're going to talk about. Anybody? James Clear? If you haven't read it, grab it.
I'll throw it out.
Really, please.
Yeah, I mean, I read it about a year ago, and I thought it was so helpful. Kind of some big premises is the idea of habit stacking. Do what you already do and build new habits upon it. And I haven't shared it with the staff and some of our lead team people, and they've really enjoyed it. And it's been sort of catalytic in helping them develop and maintain some habits.
Anybody else? Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, this is Evan here. I read that book.
What's up, Evan?
What's up? I read that book, probably about 2 or so years. It was before the pandemic. I just remember picking that up. I really like the concept of, I can't remember what it was, but it was kind of grouping different things. So if you currently have habits presently, you're attaching things to those habits. So things that you want to develop further. So I thought that was a really cool insight. That was probably one of the biggest takeaways I remember from that book.
Love it. One of the reasons I put it up here is because I think part of what he talks about that's cool, I can't remember the exact curve. You'll have to buy the book and look at it. But he talks about how when we form productive habits, that most people in their studies actually quit or stop living out that habit. And I think this goes for our organizations as well, right before they're about to see the upswing or the benefit of the habit. He literally says, you start a habit and it kind of goes like this. It's kind of like when you try dieting and nothing happens. And at the moment where it's just about to be catalytic is that deep valley where people generally tap out. And that was pretty encouraging to me because I've seen myself do that. And I've seen our organization do that a lot. So the reason I throw that book up, and Tori, you can go forward, is because I want to have a conversation around the idea of values and how habits work. We do a lot of work with churches with values. Some of you guys have done those works. We've had conversations on the call around that and around how values look for us. Keep going, Tori. And one of the things that one of the tools that we use is this idea of alignment and how perspective comes. And so we talk about this phrase all the time. Some of you are like, yes, Lee, we see it, but Kay and I want to throw it up there with our team all the time. Our strategy drives our vision through our values towards our mission. Our mission determines our values, vision, strategy, but our strategy drives our vision through our values towards our mission. We use this tool to align all of our teams and all of our churches. I'm actually going to lunch here in about 45 minutes with some of our young leaders, and I'm literally going to scribble this on the napkin for them, because I think there's also life consequences around this as well, about what's your life mission, what do you care about, what's your vision of tomorrow, and what do you need to do today to make that happen. But I want to focus on values for just a second. So Tori goes forward, you're going to see an example. I don't think anybody's on here from New City. I don't think Derek or Steve is on here. If they are, oh well. So this is an example of a tool we've been using. So what we've been doing with this is asking you, and you can do this with your team, is basically take your team through the exercise where you list your 5 to 6 to 7 core values and actually have them apply a number. This is something that Kay does really well with teams that I've stolen, and basically apply a number, 1 being the value is much more aspirational in our context, and 10 being, man, we're living this value out all the time. So if you go to the next page, Tori, you'll see kind of the worksheet that New City actually did with this. There you can see their rankings. So literally that's what the sheet would look like that you guys as executive leaders would use. You list your core values, they have 7, and you go around the room and basically say, what's your number? And then you can see the rankings there, everywhere from 3.83, they're a very aspirational value of family, to the idea of gathering purposefully and authentically, appears to, based on this sheet, for their staff team, that is the highest value that they're living out. And so we do this all the time and kind of get a team's thing. So one of the things that I've been wrestling with, and I'd love to get some feedback from you guys on this call as leaders, is when I throw this up here and you guys look at this and you go, okay, biblical truth, gather purposefully, uncommon for the city. My wrestling over the last few months has been, what do we do with this? Like, okay, what do we do with this? Like, this is great to look at, and for you guys to go, yeah, this is what my team's saying, but what does Brian Becker really do with it, right? What does he do in Sacramento with this information? And I think one of the things that would be helpful for us to talk about is, how do the habits and how do the conclusions that we live out at each of our teams and each of our staffs actually impact the core value? How does that actually impact why the ranking is what it is? And so I think that habits actually have a real insight into why we would rank the values in this way. And we had a conversation, some of us on this call, kind of on a text thread around that. Tori, you can go forward a couple of slides real quick. And one of the things that we saw, keep going. One of the things that we saw is this: how are we driven and dragged down by our ingrained habits and accepted conclusions? So how are we as leaders, how are we as an organization either driven forward, or how are we kind of held back and dragged down by our ingrained habits and accepted conclusions? Because I think there's a reason why everybody puts that number up there. There's some kind of a narrative behind the 3 or the 4 or the 6 or the 7, and it probably has something to do with the habits and accepted conclusions. Go forward one more slide, Tori. Here's how I would define some habits for you to kind of think about, and then I'll shut up for a second and let you guys give some insights or comments. It's basically this: what are the routines that we follow as a team or as an organization? So what are the things that we consistently are doing over and over again that form that habit? Secondly, what are the narratives that we repeat? What are the stories that we tell that kind of become habitual? And then third, what is the language that we use? So we say language creates culture. So a lot of the terms or the terminology they use, and sometimes when we're able to be with your teams, we hear the language come out all the time. What are the language? Chris, Chris Hall, what's the one that your team said you use all the time?
Priming the pump.
Priming the pump. Yes, we say priming the pump all the time. I have no idea what that means, but Chris uses it all the time with his team, and they know it. And so it creates part of the culture there. And then the actions that we take, right? That these 4 things, and probably others, really form habits. And my argument, and I'm going to shut up, is these things form our habits, and those habits will then really speak to what are the aspirational or what are the actual values that we live out. So we can say we have these values, but when we really look at the habits of our day-to-day our day-to-day interactions as both a team and as an organization, it's going to really tell the story. Anybody want to, and Tori, you can stop sharing for a second. Anybody want to comment on that? What are some habits that you guys have? What are you learning through that? Or we're not sure this is actually true in us?
In our staff meetings, we always have a general template sharing good news, but the good news sharing has at times turned into something that will be good news versus, wow, that was really amazing. And we just do it over and over and over. The spirit behind it is good, but the repetition of it has lost a little bit of the punch.
A little bit of the umph. Somebody else, habits you guys have, good, bad. Again, please don't hear me say habits are bad. I'm talking about how habits are informing the values and where they are. Somebody else, Joe, what do you got?
Yeah, I mean, actually, I was going to speak on the language piece.
Please.
Yeah, I think language has been so critical for who we've become at Active, from teams to hires to even when people just don't fit necessarily on the team. I think it's so critical for them to get language because of the cultural piece. But what we've been running into recently is we've gotten some young leaders around a table, and it's about continually reintroducing that language. And as much as we want to believe that the language is assumed or known, especially with like some young leaders, it's not, common sense isn't universal when it comes to this language, and they're not going to pick it up unless I put it right in front of them and say, like, this is what it is. So yeah, we've been navigating that the past month.
Have you identified, Joe, habitual language that you use that you want to keep and maybe some that you want to get rid of?
Yeah, some of it. Some of the language, I think it's more of how do you say it? It's more of a positioning of like how it comes across. So for instance, we are a organization that believes good enough is not good enough, right?
That's your
that'll
language.
do, won't do. Yeah, that'll do, won't do, right? That kind of idea that's slowly been ingrained, but more specifically, more tangibly, it's like we believe that the best is yet to come. And so we operate in that capacity, right? It's not just words. Like we operate in that capacity that there's more that we can grow. There's more we can learn. There's more that we have the capacity to become. And so we're just learning that when you're not embodying that, we feel it around the table. Or if you don't believe that language is true, we feel it around the table.
Then that value is probably not lived out because of the language.
Yeah.
Somebody else want to comment on habits and how they connect to your values? Maybe you're in a position right now where you're trying to change some habits so that the values will become more actualized. Anybody?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think we are currently in a season of still trying to figure out what good habits are, what we're going to continue doing, what are some things that we want to change. And so one of the things that we're trying to, I don't know if it's good or bad, but we're giving people the freedom to fail, try something. It's okay to, if it's not a glowing success, but the fact that we're attempting new things, I think is a new phrase that our staff has been hearing.
Is that not a habit you guys would have had?
No, I don't think that was a habit we had prior to.
Yeah, got it. And when you think about, like, I just had a conversation with Kevin Weir, who's on the call, and he's been on the job, boots on the ground for 2 weeks. So he's a new executive guy, and one of the things that's going to happen right away is he's going to observe these habits and he's going to see them. And then he's going to have to figure out, like, okay, even from a For Healthful's perspective, what's right, wrong, missing, confused around these habits, and how do we drive them towards what we want to accomplish? Anybody else want to weigh in on that?
I would say one of the things that you can find your negative habits from is what you find you and your team is manufacturing energy, right? Like you actually literally have to manufacture the energy towards something. That probably can hint you towards what is a negative habit. And then as far as from the positive habit side, one of the things that I've seen some churches do is let's say, for example, for onboarding of staff, I think somebody just mentioned that earlier, that they do something called Align, where literally once or twice a year, they take all the new hires and bring them all together and be able to say, hey, this is our alignment time. But then once a year, you also do a realign to be able to say, hey, we need to remind the existing people about the different habits and the culture and the values and all those type of things. And so to be able to have that tension between the align for the new people and the realign for the existing people has been super valuable around that.
Boom. Keep in mind that, you know, when we do that stack ranking of values, that aspirational is not terrible. In some ways, aspirational we don't want them to stay there, but it'll drive a lot of our work on it conversations going forward. So as we look and we identify, Chris, we just did this with you and with your team and kind of had some conversations. I don't know if you reflected on the whys behind it or the habits or conclusions.
Yeah, it was a good conversation for us because we realized even within our 4 core values that some of those, or one of them in particular, was more aspirational than anything else. So it actually kind of helped drive some of the things that we want to change programmatically and habitually within the team and church. So seeing that weakness has helped us as a team identify that and figure out how to solve that problem for us.
So you actually had follow-up conversations around that?
Yeah, when we look at our strategic plan, the solution to that is integrated into the 1 year and the 90-day rocks as we move forward to try to increase compassion amongst the staff and the church. Because
that was it was high aspirational. It was like, yeah, we're not seeing that. Okay, minute or two more around habits, and then we're going to pivot a little bit. I think
this is Tom.
Well, please go
Tommy
ahead.
From San Diego Church of Christ. Yeah,
Tommy,
I'm
how
a
are you,
minister
buddy?
out in good. I'm a minister out in Chula Vista, California, and we have a significant sized Latino ministry, and we've been working on really just making it just South Point. We're one big family versus using the language of, the Spanish are with us today. For a long time, trying to build that bridge between the Spanish and the English ministry, because one of our core values is diversity. And so we really want to highlight that, whether it's intergenerational or racial. And so we're working on that in Chula Vista right now.
One of the exercises you guys can do, so I'll give you the part 2, is do the stack ranking of your values. Put them up on the board, put them up on a whiteboard, put them up on a sheet. Have your team, don't set it up, don't argue it, don't preemptively tee it up. Just kind of tell them like, hey, here's the ranking 1 to 10, give us your numbers. Get your team to look at them all at once, and then as a subtext to begin to go, what are the habits that either drive this forward or hinder this from moving forward as a really effective core value, and actually list those as subpoints underneath. And I believe then it begins to drive action, right? We all love action, but some of our work on it can kind of help us inform the action that we're going to take. And so part of this habitual exercise I'm moving you through is because I was sitting there with teams looking at their habits and going, okay, what do we do about it? Like, is it just going to sit there and be what it is, or is there some things we can identify that'll actually impact it? So hence that conversation. Okay, I'm going to flip it over to you. We're going to pivot a little bit from that conversation, just a little bit, because it does tie in. Because when we talk about mission, values, vision, and strategy, we talk about habits and conclusions that we come to that drive those. One of the core ways we've been trying to work with churches to provide accountability is to begin to integrate some EOS thinking into some of the other tools that we're giving you. We've got 5-6 guys on this call that are part of this process. So I'm going to hand it off to Kay and let him kind of lead through this conversation for a few minutes.
Can you define?
I'll definitely do that. Angel asked a good question on there that says, what comes first, the value or the idea of it, or the habits? And I think it's a great question. And it's a little bit of a chicken and the egg if you can think about it from that perspective. But I do think that if you can start with your core values, because it's the core values of what you want to do, and then the habits will be able to really be reflecting that and to be able to celebrate that and executing those values. But sometimes there's habits that actually happen that is not necessarily a value. And that's probably a consideration point to be able to say, should it truly be a value? Should it be something that we would actually examine and say, this is a core value? And that's why I say it's a little bit of a chicken and the egg. So great question though. All right, so Tori, if you can share the deck and specifically, I think we are on the vision perspective. So as Lee just mentioned, as far as the alignment tool, our strategy drives our vision towards our values, towards our mission. And when we talk about the vision, one of the things that we see more than anything else is that in this season, I think we've mentioned it in a couple of calls before too, is that what we've seen is that leaders are more nearsighted in their vision than ever before, right? What COVID has done is it's really caused us to look at 90-day paces and say, okay, what are we looking at here? And what we're trying to remind everybody about is that, hey, remember those dreams that we used to have? Remember the hills that we used to, want to charge together as a team? And what we're trying to say is that, hey, let's not lose sight of that. In fact, it's going to be a really, really important piece to be able to draw towards what is next for us. So with that, Tori, are we having challenges as far as sharing the screen goes?
Yeah, it's telling me it's paused, and when I hit play, it's not playing. So stand by.
Okay, all right. Well, I'll keep on talking. So with that, with the nearsightedness of leaders, one of the things that has helped us is what's called EOS. EOS is an entrepreneurial operating system. It's gaining a lot of traction in the business world, but it's been a great framework for us to be able to walk alongside of churches and come and say, hey, what is your 10-year target? Now, a 10-year target is something that's just like so far away that, man, it is so hard to even put a picture towards or put a plan towards. In fact, if any of you go away and do a 10-year target planning, please do not do that, because that would be such a waste of time, because actually that will change, right? But that's the 10-year target. But at the same time, we need something that far away to be able to align us towards what we want to accomplish together. And so what we've done with this is that there's a 10-year target and a 3-year picture and a 1-year plan and quarterly rocks. And this is kind of like the EOS system that we've adopted. We've altered a little bit, and we've shared that with different churches. And so we've got a couple of guys here that are actually in the middle of implementing this. Some of them have been doing it for a little bit longer than others. But Tori, can we advance the slide there to get to the 10-year target, or is it still paused? Still paused? Okay. If you want to give me share response,
I'll do it. Yeah, Tori, why don't you change
share from here?
Make K the host.
All right, so the 10-year target. So let's give you some examples around the 10-year target, because the 10-year target, it really is different depending on the church. Certain churches might really want something very, very targeted, very specific, and very associated to a number, metrics, all that type of stuff. And others, it might be more of a narrative type of thing. And that's fine. We really want it to be part of the DNA of the church. All right, so let me see if I can share here. All right, so the 10-year target is what we talked about. The 3-year picture, once again, is that if we were on target for that 10-year target, what does it look like in 3 years to be able to paint a picture? You can't paint a picture in the 10-year target, but you can paint a picture for the 3-year picture. And then you can put a 1-year plan towards accomplishing that 3-year picture, and then break it down into quarterly organizational rocks and individual rocks. So we're going to break this down. We're going to share examples from the different people that are represented here. And one more just analogy that I think has been so helpful around this is that if any of you are golfers or if you like bowling, right? Like, one of the things is that they tell you when you aim at the target, let's say, for example, it's a par 4, par 5, and you got the flag way out there. You don't really aim at the flag. You're actually aiming at the leaf that is in front of you that is actually aligned to the target that you're actually going for, because it's the immediate target that brings you alignment. And that's what the 3-year picture actually does for us, to be able to get us focused and on target to hit that 10-year target. So let me give you some examples of the 10-year target. In fact, I'm going to push it over to Derek. Derek at the Crossing is going to talk about his 10-year target.
Yeah, so we're the one at the top there. The Crossing is a multi-generational, multi-ethnic network of 7 churches with a median age of 35 years old that has doubled our outward focused impact. So on our end, we've really kind of broken that down. It's well phrased there, but we've kind of broken that down into three different areas, which number 1 being multi-generational, multi-ethnic, median age. Number 2 being a double impact on partnerships, and number 3 being 7 network churches. And Kay, what I've loved about the process is like similar to your golf analogy, but just us setting a target. It's not necessarily that we have to hit a bullseye, but we at least know what target we're trying to hit. And when we go after this as a team and talk about it as a leadership team, it helps us ask hard questions, create a filter. And also forces us to like clarify why we're doing what we're doing. If we want to be 10 years from now, if we even want to be in the ballpark of doing that, we know we're going to have to be intentional. And so personally, I've loved the filter piece because there's so many different options in church world that we can go after. So that's what our 10-year target is.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And specifically, there is, a backstory around the median age of 35 years, right, for you guys?
Yeah. So the Crossing does a great job. Candidly, the Crossing does a great job at being multi-generational, multi-ethnic, median age. But as we look at transition and succession and all that, we know that we're going to have to increase our intentionality as our leaders hand off to the next generational leaders in that next season. And so by including it, kind of the backstory there is we're saying we have to intentionally design our systems, and whether it's who's on the platform, who we're reaching, how we're doing it, we have to be intentional with that as our leadership hands off to the next generation. Does that make sense, Kay?
Yeah, and I'll add to what Derek said. One of the things we discovered through our Influence Daily survey and through what we can deem from our database was exactly what Derek said, is this is where we are. But as we think about 10 years, and I know some of you are like, oh my gosh, I can't even think about 10 weeks. But as we think about 10 years, that became a very crucial issue for us to make sure. And, the thing that's happened that I'm excited about, and I think you'll hear from some of the other guys, is this language in the last half a year has taken hold to where it has begun to be a filter for some of our decision making.
Yeah, that's great. And like, for example, the one that's at the very bottom there. Can you guys hear me? Internet unstable. Real Life Church is to launch 30 campuses and churches in the state of California that are irresistible to the unchurched by 2030. And so specifically for this church, one of the things is, if you haven't heard the news, people are moving out of the state of California to other desirable places in the country. And so with that, they really are putting kind of like this thought and this vision around God still cares and loves for California. In fact, the best way to be able to reach California and develop a heart for California is to be able to launch churches. And so that's part of their 10-year picture, which then informs all the things that they are doing. So that's their 10-year target. So these are just some examples around that. Once again, there's a lot of questions that you would have around all of these things. It's supposed to be in some sense fuzzy and saying like, how do you actually do that? Well, that's where the alignment comes in for the 3-year picture. So as far as the 3-year picture goes, would love to kick it over, I believe, to Active Joe. Is that right?
Yeah. How's it going, guys? Yeah, so we actually took a different approach. Instead of doing a 10-year target, we did a 5-year target, which I don't know if Lee and Kai would recommend, but that's what we did. And with that, we were able to kind of parse out like, okay, what's a halfway point look like for us? We had 3 really kind of audacious, in the next 5 years, we believe that we can reach these goals. And with that, we basically got a team together and we just threw what that's actually going to look like on the wall. And so our entire team was part of this process. It was such a cool experience. Just having the team really just dream of what the church is going to tangibly look like. And when I say tangibly, I mean like let's get as specific as we can. And again, like Kay said, there's a lot of fuzzy, but that's what we're building out with our 1-year plans. We're really beginning to put some detail into the fuzzy work. But for this, as you'll see, that we did actually a lot of numbers because we felt like the numbers were the thing that was going to keep our team specifically driving forward. Not a lot of like sexy language on there, but there's a lot of language that is going to help us be aware of our metrics and our dashboard. And so in the past, we've been going at this we met with Lee and his team about 6 weeks ago. We had our first EOS official meeting 3 weeks ago, and we just had our second one this past week. And every decision we make is now driven by this 3-year picture. So we have our 5-year target, but our 3-year picture is even more valuable to our team specifically because it gives them even a greater sense of this is what we're actually going to look like rather than these giant goals. And yeah, so as we really parsed out our 1-year plan in order to get here, this thing has been invaluable. So yeah, there's a lot of questions you probably can have about it. A lot of questions I'm still trying to figure out about our 3-year picture, but that's kind of where we're at right now.
That's awesome, Joe. And that's exactly what it does, right? It is the leaf that is right in front of you that you can actually aim towards, and you can actually start seeing. And every time we've done this exercise, man, people just start lighting up and getting excited because, and I don't know if it's the fact that, we're coming out of COVID and we don't know what that all means. And we forgot to dream and, like envision what this looks like. But it just gets people so excited and thinking, all right, now we know where we're headed. Now we know what we need to put goals around. Now we need to know what to put a plan towards. And so I love this picture. And as far as the 5-year or the 10-year target, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer, except for the fact that it's got to be something that is going to pull you forward. And then that 3-year picture is going to be able to help you align towards that. So I think there's no right or wrong answer around that.
Hey, can you answer the question? Do you feel like there's a size that really matters? Like somebody might be listening going, man, my church is too small to even care about this. I think I know your answer, but I'm teeing you up.
Right. Yeah, absolutely not. I mean, because the fact is that God, whatever size church, whatever our sphere of influence is, God has given us those dreams and visions for that, right? And so whatever that might be, it might not be even to, let's say, for example, numerically grow the church or create campuses, but it might be to have a more influence into the community or, a greater footprint in the activeness of global missions, or whatever it might be, whatever the vision that God has given the leadership of the church. Joe, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I want to say as this moment was happening, it was so encouraging because it did feel like the first breath of fresh air after, going 2 years into a pandemic. And it felt like one of those, like, okay, now we know where we're going. The 3-year or the 5-year target actually probably caused a little anxiety because it's so big. But this right here made us go like, yeah, we could do this. Like, this is something that's attainable within the next 3 years, within our lifetime, within our team's lifetime together. And so I loved that we did this 3-year picture. But the thing that we did start feeling right away was that the 5-year target, we're like, maybe we should have done a 10-year. And so there's a lot of like pros and cons that we even wrestled through and we still talk about to this day. Like maybe the 10-year would have pushed us even harder. But I don't know. It is what it is right now. And we're loving this 3-year picture because it's really helped us map out the next 3 years really at Active. And so, yeah.
Awesome. Now for us to dream and picture what that 3-year picture is. And a lot of times what we actually do is once we do this exercise, we kind of even qualify and say, hey, this might be a little cheesy moment, but close your eyes and just kind of listen to what this picture is painting. And even asking them, hey, what excites you most about that 3-year picture? So it's a pretty great exercise. Then from that 3-year picture, it's like, all right, if we want this to be an actual picture in the next 3 years, then we got to put a 1-year plan towards that. And so we're going to ask, I think, Chris, you're going to talk about your 1-year plan, right? Hopefully I got this here. Go ahead and talk, Chris, on your 1-year plan.
Yeah, I could not agree more with everything Joseph just said. Like in even processing through the 5-year, 10-year, I told Lee up front, I said, I kind of have some vision and number PTSD from the last 2.5 years. And I just don't know how comfortable I am on putting numbers, because we had set previous 5-year visions and didn't hit those numbers because of the pandemic. And I was like, I'm never doing that again. Lee pushed me to really reconsider that. So we kind of came up with a hybrid, but we did the same thing as you, Joseph. We didn't do a 10, we did a 5, because that was what we felt most comfortable with doing. Similarly with our 3-year, kind of helped us get to that halfway point. And so right now, like you just said, I think our staff is seeing the reality of a 3-year picture a little bit more clearly than they had the 5, but all in all, it gives us that direction. The one year plan for us has been super valuable, even recently as our last staff meeting, as we started to develop our first 90-day rocks, because it really does paint a really clear picture.
There they are on screen.
There they are. Yeah.
Yep.
And these were developed by our team, with Lee's help of through the SMP. But these have been really, really helpful for us, not only in creating direction, but also the intentional language. Like we've adopted this idea of bridge events. We always knew what they were, but everyone called them something different. So it's given us common language as we're looking at programming. It's given us some intentionality. I think one of our lead admin said that the power on this is really, this is now the lens by which we do all ministry for the next year. And so it's helped us develop those rocks. And even so, like with our, like developing a plan to reach, engage, and empower 20s and 30 somethings is a 1 year to get us to, or a 3 year to get us to our 5 year, which is that we want to more accurately reflect our community, which means we need to lower our minimum and median age to 32. And that's what our 5-year target is. So this 1 year plan was super helpful for us, even just in this last staff meeting on setting our 90-day rocks.
Yeah, and Kay, one of the things I'll interject working with Chris on this is I think it just simply began to put everything consolidated together. This wasn't tough for them. I mean, it was work, but it wasn't like they had to just grab things. So any of you listening, like you think, well, we're just going to make up these 7 things. These 7 things really existed, whether in Chris's heart or on their team strategically. It's just really now we've got some accountability behind it. We've got some intentionality behind it. We've identified the words. The wordsmithing is important because it really speaks to direction. And so, just so you guys know, this isn't 7 things that Chris suddenly came up with last week. This is really just helping to identify what is the work on it that we as a team should be doing. And to someone's point in the chat, I think there are smaller things that teams will continue to do, but this is the macro plan of like here as a team, organizationally, no matter what role or position you play, this is what we're going to continually work on. So I'm assuming Chris will, in his meetings, there will be either meetings or there will be agendas that will say, where are we on this? What's the status of this? How's that going?
Yeah, that's good. And again, this is all to be able to help fulfill that 3-year picture. If in year 1, we're able to tackle these, then we are on the trajectory to be able to make that 3-year picture a reality. So now, once you have a 1-year plan, then you got to break that down into now, what does that look like into 4 parts of the quarterlies, right? And so Mike Fruley, you're going to talk from Lake Sawyer perspective on the quarterlies. Let's talk about that one.
Yeah, so we basically did this journey again from the 10-year target, 3-year picture, 1-year plan, and then from the 1-year plan formed kind of these are the things we were going to tackle in quarter 2, which we were just wrapped. We had our meeting yesterday to kind of wrap and set Q3 rocks, but you can see there, these are what we defined as our organizational rocks. We wanted to operationalize our engagement pipelines with creation of playbooks about that. And so if you've been around some Growmentum calls, things like serve selflessly, connect deeply, influence daily, like we wanted to help kind of think through first step, second step, destination around those things and actually build some structure to that. So that was one of the things that someone on our team was tackled to do, finalize and activate the connection pipeline. How do we really help assimilate and connect new guests, refine our online ministry strategy? Thinking when COVID hit, all of us tried to figure out, well, what is online? What does that look like? How do we want to leverage that? And then coming kind of on this side of COVID, what is that as a resource and a tool for us moving forward? We kind of had conversations around it, but this really forced us to define that and work towards executing it in this quarter. Excuse me, implement Easter follow-up plan. We want to be very clear what we're trying to do next steps out of Easter in Q2, provided the perfect opportunity and time to focus on an Easter rock, and then identify baselines for scorecards and goals. Again, coming out of COVID, what do you measure? What's important? So maybe some of the metrics that were of value pre-COVID are not as much anymore. And so really wanted to spend some time with that. And so those were the organizational rocks as a team that we wanted to tackle. And then from our lead team, we had individual rocks, pieces, smaller pieces of some of the organizational rocks that they would own. So you can see that on the right side, identify first serve opportunities in every ministry. That's again, part of the pipeline of serving selflessly, is we got to get people to just engage in service. And so what are some of those easy first serve opportunities? We need to define them. So we had someone tackle that, strategize online service and digital ministry. Again, that's part of the organizational rock. And so I won't necessarily go through all of those, but you can see that there are smaller bite-sized pieces of those rocks that our individuals are doing to help us achieve our organizational rocks. And then even from that perspective, they're then passing down to their team, hey, this is the part that you play in helping me accomplish this rock, which helps us organizationally accomplish the rock together. And so again, so we just finished that up. We had a review as part of our 90-day meeting, our quarterly meeting. How do we do? Where do we come up short? Where do we knock it out of the park? And then what do we need to do next quarter to help us continue to move forward towards our 1 year, our 1 year plan?
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, and I'm literally here with the Lake Sawyer team, as we just did the quarterly yesterday, and then define the quarterlies for the next Q3. And it's just been really energizing from a perspective of like, okay, here's the wins and here's the things that we did. In fact, if we didn't make it a rock, those probably would have gone away, because the urgent is Sunday, making sure that Sunday happens every Sunday, right? Versus actually putting these things as a rock to say, hey, we got to put this in place first before we put the other things in place. And so that's really driven the priority of things. So all that to say, the vision is the 10-year target, the 3-year picture, the 1-year plan, and the quarterlies that break down to be able to fulfill the plan, the picture, and the target. And so you can take some of these things, you can take, different parts of these things that might excite you and your team. If you need any help, please reach out. Do you have any questions for the guys?
We got like
that
4 or
shared?
5 minutes, Kay, for questions. So before we wrap.
Yep.
Anybody?
So we got Derek who did the 10-year target. We got Joe who did the 3-year picture. We got Chris who did the 1-year plan. We got Mike who did the quarterly. Any questions for them?
I'll tee up a question that I actually have because we're in the middle of it, but it's like any of you guys can answer. I would assume maybe some guys on the call have this, is like, is the energy, maybe this is a Doug question, is the energy you're spending to actually execute this at this point, does it feel like this is beneficial energy wise, because you're having zero sum, right? So you're using this structure. So talk a little bit about the energy that it's taking to actually execute this. And my second question would be, how is your team responding? Like, how are they, you're going, hey, we're doing this. How are they responding to it? You can take either question. Derek, Joe, any of you guys.
Yeah, it did take a lot to get this thing going. It's probably took spending some time with Lee, his team coming out, helping us out, unpack it. And then a whole 2 weeks of me just kind of diving into the book. What the heck is EOS? Just to get a sense of like what we're doing and what are the purpose of it all. And so it is a lot on the front end. And then as we got into the meeting, I had this nervous feeling of like, okay, is it going to feel like we're doing anything? Because we're in Q0 right now, and it's all about language. Like, we're just trying to figure out what the heck we're actually trying to accomplish in this Q0, and just trying to get the systems and processes that maybe we haven't taken care of yet in place. And so it doesn't feel like it's necessarily moving things forward yet, but I can feel like as we went into our first meeting, team was super excited. Second meeting, team was like, okay, it's like I'm getting the sense of where we're going with this, but they have an anticipation for quarter one. So when we actually start aiming for our 5 years, they're going to be ready to go. They're going to be excited for it, but it's taking some time. It is, and you got to almost like push through that awkward, especially with some of your creative types. So we're going to be asking probably some of the best questions to ask about functionality and form of all this. But we just push through the awkward, and they've been the most helpful in these things.
Thanks, Joe. That's good.
And
Yeah,
I'll
I would
maybe speak-
add.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Mike.
I was just gonna say, like speaking through, like having gone through quarter zero and then now Q1, and then rolling it out from the different levels of the staff, there is definitely, Joe's right, like the alignment around language and understanding. But I think what has been awesome to see is very strategically, we're hitting off things that are pushing us towards our 1 year plan. And with that, we're seeing growth already towards our 10-year target. And so the staff, they're looking at it and they're energized because, hey, where we projected to be, so towards some of our metrics around that 10-year target, we're already past that. And so they're seeing sort of the fruit of their labor, and they're it's creating opportunities for win. Like we're defining what's the most important thing that they need to focus on over the next 90 days. And that gives them clarity to execute and know that this is, if they can pull this off, this is winning for them.
Yeah, I was gonna to add on to that, and as an encouragement, I think it is a lot of energy output for the team at first, but the momentum that we're starting to see at the crossing has been tremendous. Even like statements that you kind of hope to hear, like we know what we're going after. We're a fairly large organization, so even other teams who have had this leak down to them through our lead team are starting to prioritize resources based on where we're headed. Does this help us get there? So the energy output, I think, Lee, to your question, is significant, but the returns we're already starting to see and the excitement from the team and the focus that's being created, it seemed well worth it so far.
Yeah, and in the chat, so let's just kind of wrap with this before we, and Kate, unmute if you'd like, you know, some of the guys are saying honestly, and I get it, like, you know, hey man, this is like a thing, but again, you guys got this. Like part of the goal behind our calls is to just give you this stuff that then works in your context. So this is something that is just, you know, very, very helpful in what's already in your guys's gut. Like this isn't like, it's already there. What we've found is this becomes a bridge for you to get on the page. And then secondly, to get your team on board. They want this. They just have to understand and where you are. So this process is going to help you identify that, and it's going to do that. I put in there earlier, you may not have seen it on the chat, but the idea of like, we want you guys to know, like all of this is spirit led. So it's, we use the term at Growman, like it's led of the spirit, being aware of the strategy at the same time. And those two things are not against each other. That, you know, some of us, we just want to, hey, the spirit's going to tell us whatever we're going to tell us, or, you know, it's just all strategy. We believe that within all of this 10, 5, 3, 1, that there's a spirit-led aspect to it. And you guys are all in the spot you're supposed to be in, and you can lead very well there. This is just beginning to introduce you to a structure that can help put, I don't know, can put some real meat to what you guys are already wrestling with, whatever, at wherever place your church is. So okay, or someone else want to add to that, to some of that feeling people may be having right now?
Yeah, the greatest sense is accountability. I think that term's accountability of like who's overseeing what, and then who's handling what. And so that's been the greatest blessing for our community, is just the accountability factor that has been grown in our community, in our team.
I'm going to keep talking. Okay,
That's good.
Okay, if you want to throw that QR code up, I want to make sure that we get that Think Tank Live QR code up before everybody has to start to bail to go to lunch or whatever. So we're going to keep this conversation going for sure, you guys, but we always want to be really respectful of your hour, because we appreciate whatever coast you're on. Peterson's up there in the far, wherever he is. we wanted to throw this out for the first time today. And so if you're able to, I don't know what device you're on. Last year we did this with a smaller group, and this year this is the first time we're announcing it to you guys that are on this call. It will go out to those that are part of this network and this call. But basically, we're inviting you to come to Vegas for basically 2 days for what we call a Think Tank Live, which is what we do here on a monthly basis, but together. And it's really about 70% networking and about 30% us getting in the room and doing this, but not having to be on Zoom, to be able to sit across from Wade and Lindsay and Chris and be able to share meals together. And so if you scan that, and Tori, if you want to drop the actual, or Kay, one of you guys want to drop the actual link in the chat, that'd be great. But if you scan the QR code, it's going to take you to the registration. And basically, we've tried to make it like, just get here to cover our costs to make sure that you can go to Topgolf. We're going to feed you really well. For those of you who like wine, we make sure that you're exposed to somebody who has wine that's better than any wine you've probably ever had as part of this. And then we're going to spend the day together just talking through helpful things for us as executive level leaders. And we really limit it to what we define as executive level: lead pastors, executive pastors, campus pastors, that sort of framework, people that are influencers and decision makers. And so we do limit the size a little bit to keep it intimate and to be able for us to network together. So we would just encourage you. It will go out in the email, but you are all invited to come hang with us. We'll have a preferred hotel that we'll send out to you as you think about travel. Kay, you want to add anything to that?
Nope. Yep. I would love for you guys to join.
Yep. Just come and hang out with us and experience Vegas at whatever level you're comfortable experiencing it. I'll just leave it at that. So there you go. All right. Guys, we appreciate, guys and gals, we appreciate you guys being on here. In just a second, Tori will stop the recording, and sometime